Welcome to Practical Talk Time. I'm your host, Usha Kumar. Today I have with me a wonderful guest who has driven all the way from Massachusetts to be here with us and to tell us whether science can prove the afterlife. I was just wondering, are we all having a good time in this life? And after this, what? Are we going to be around in another form? Are we going to come back here as another person? There are so many questions that we ask and we never really get the right answer. So let us pick Maxine's brain. Maxine Meilleur, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's such an honor to have you here. You have so much knowledge on the subject and you're studying all about it, and I'm not sure if you're also researching about all the scientific researches that have been going on to find out whether there's an afterlife.
Oh, well, the honor is mine to be here, Usra.
Thank you.
The subject of the afterlife has been here since cavemen have been here, and that has been the question that people have been asking for tens of thousands of years. Do we live on after the death of our body? And now that we live in a modern scientific age, can science help us understand the answer to that question?
So what have you learned in your school now about afterlife?
Well, I've learned that there's a great deal of debate, and people cling to their beliefs, which is perfectly fine. There are some religions that are based totally on text and on faith, and the text might say, this is what happens, and thousands, millions of people believe that without question. And that's okay. That's one religion, maybe not better, maybe not less than any other belief. But then I've also learned that now that science has come to the fore in the last 200 years, there's been a lot of evidence that scientists can now look at and begin to have different theories about the afterlife.
So how have scientific people tried to find some proof? So I know earlier today we were talking about this, and you said, first of all, we need to figure out the definition of all these terms.
Exactly. If we could look at the first screen or the first slide, we really need to start talking.
Not that one. We have to go to the number 2.
Number two. Yes. If you're talking about can science prove the afterlife, we have to first of all get the word proof out of our system, because proof and prove are not scientific terms. They're math terms. And if you can remember your high school geometry, you prove the Pythagorean theorem, you prove different theories, and proof is a math term. Scientists do not use the word prove because they know that science is always changing. Even what we think we know about science has changed dramatically since the days of Aristotle. And Copernicus changed the way that science thought about, are we the center of the universe, or is the sun the center of the solar system? So our understanding of science can change. And Sir Isaac Newton, he was a great mathematician and he was a great scientist. He came up with the theory of gravitation. Okay, everybody takes gravity to be absolute proof, to be the absolute truth. But if you've seen things like I have, levitation,
how do people levitate?
You would know that you would know that the theory of gravitation works well in most cases. Again, Einstein came along and corrected a lot of things that Newton said. But even Einstein didn't get it all correct, or didn't get it all fully understood. It wasn't until the quantum science of the last 20 years that even added to the body of science that Einstein started. So we understand now that proof is not totally truth, or a term to be used in science, and science itself changes over time. Now, okay, where does that leave us? Okay, y'all are scratching your heads. Well, let's look at the scientific method, okay? This is the method that scientists use to not prove anything, but to support a theory. And the way the scientific method starts is that we observe a phenomena, okay? And then through the observation, we think about it, and we form a theory in our head. Why does this phenomena occur time and time again? And then we test that theory.
With experimentation.
With experimentation.
Under various conditions.
Under various conditions. And we gather more data. And that the original theory might get thrown out the window. Or additional theories might be brought in. So scientists never really operate from just one theory, especially in the scientific method. Another thing we have to talk about is consciousness, okay? When you're talking about the afterlife, you're talking about the after what? Of what? You mean after this physical body dies, okay? So is our consciousness tied to our physical body? Is our consciousness just our physical body? Is our consciousness just our brain? And when our brain ceases to function, we cease to function? Okay, these are theories. These are questions. So we have to define consciousness. And in the theories we'll talk about in a minute, there's a lot of proof that our consciousness is not tied to our physical body. When we talk about the theory of the afterlife, it is called the theory of survival. So in scientific research, the theory of survival of the soul, or the theory of survival.
So Maxine, you said in the last 200 years there have been more scientific studies regarding afterlife and the theory of survival, as you call it.
Yes.
So do you have names of important research groups that have done any measurable work in this regard?
Oh, not only measurable work, but libraries full of measurable work. If we could go to the second slide.
That's the third one.
Oh, the third slide then. There it is. In 1885, the Society of Psychical Research was formed in the United Kingdom. And you'll have to remember the Victorian age was the age of the telegraph, was the age of the steam engine, was the age of the telephone, was the age of the telegraph. All these was the age of electricity, was the age of all these scientific explosions, and all these scientists who had made all these inventions. When they started to consider the afterlife, they put down their experiments in electricity, chemistry, medicine, just to devote themselves to the afterlife, and they formed this Society of Psychical Research. The founders of that were the Nobel Prize laureates of their day. And a few years later, the American Society of Psychical Research in New York, a body that still exists in New York and in the U.S., was formed. There's also the Parapsychological? I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. Parapsychology. The Parapsychology, thank you, the Parapsychology Association. And also the Rhine Center. J.B. Rhine and his wife went to Duke University in the 1930s. And they were made famous by what are called the Zener cards, the pack of cards that have 5 shapes, and that began to test ESP. These Zener cards had a square, a circle, wavy line, a star, and I don't know what. And through the experimentation and controlled environment, the Rhine Center in Duke University, very well-known university, started. And then there's also, I put on the list, the PEAR lab at Princeton that studied paranormal, engineering, anomalous research, okay? Now, you can't beat that for a more scientific term for the afterlife.
Maxine, are there other alternative theories proposed by these research groups?
Absolutely. That's the next slide. Again, these scientists, any scientists, will look at the body of evidence and don't just point at one theory. They'll say, you know, maybe that's telepathy. Maybe that's not survival. Maybe that's mind reading from one mind to another. Maybe there's another theory called the super psi theory.
What is
theory.
That?
That's being able to access, the super psi theory is like me being able to access any knowledge anywhere.
Is that possible at all for anyone?
It's a theory. It's a theory.
Okay.
It's an alternative.
Oh, if it is possible, then that is the God kind of person.
It's an alternative theory to the afterlife.
Yes.
And there's the other theory of fraud. You know, people tricking each other, or
what is that?
And there's also
just pretending they went into the afterlife and came back. I mean,
or
unless you hear it from someone who's there.
Fraudulent people who are making things up.
Okay.
Okay, and
so that's also tested. Tested scientifically. Okay.
That's also a possibility. That's also a theory. So, and I also put the last theory down as, quote, the devil. You know, I mean, some religions, some belief systems believe in that. And scientists have to consider everything and not rule anything out unless the evidence points that way.
We've had people for thousands of years, and then they've had religions for thousands of years. And each religion gives a different take on afterlife. But do they generally agree that there is an afterlife?
Well, some of my very best friends are Buddhists, and their idea of the afterlife, the afterlife according to the Buddhist faith, is very different than the Judeo-Christian notion of the afterlife.
What is
that? The Buddhists believe that we have no individual soul.
I see.
And that we're part of everything else. And so when our physical body dies, we, according to Buddhism, you go back into
the whole, the one.
Into
everybody
the
goes
one.
into the same one.
Yes.
How about the Christian?
There are dogmatic beliefs in Christianity of heaven and hell.
I see.
And some Christian denominations even add a third thing, you know, like a holding area or a purgatory.
I see.
So
that's it.
Yeah.
And then other major religion, Islam?
Islam believes in the Day of Judgment. So until the Day of Judgment, you're kind of in a holding area. But after the Day of Judgment, in the Islamic view of the afterlife, you either get to heaven or you're in an internal burning hell.
It's almost like the Christian
Yes.
idea.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Only that they are in purgatory before they're going into one of those, the other two.
But so many of these religions ask you to believe just on faith, which is great. But we live in a scientific age, and the subject of the show is what can science?
Yeah, exactly.
What can science reveal? And so
and
there's
well,
the next.
The Hindu religion says you could go to heaven or you could be reborn or reincarnated. Rebirth is there in that as an afterlife.
Yes.
So
But
as
what
one
evidence?
of the things, that it's not the only one, but
No. But what evidence?
yes, what
this is
evidence is there for each of these isn't my next question.
Well, let's take a look at what the evidence is. And I think it's slide number 5, okay? And that, again, there's much evidence that supports, remember we don't say prove,
Yeah.
but there's much evidence to support the theory of survival. Let's take a look at the first one, out-of-body experiences, okay? For those who believe that our body is our consciousness, our brain is the part and parcel existence of our soul, and that when our brain ceases to function, then we cease to function. Well, that doesn't match a lot of the data. The data. The first portion I put there is out-of-body experiences, meaning when you dream, meaning when you have a traumatic experience, meaning when you have any experience in which you feel your consciousness leave your body, and you could see not through your physical eyes, but you're above your body, perhaps see all around you. Now, how is that possible if your consciousness is just limited to your body?
So that is based on people's report.
Yes.
During these scientific
Yes.
inquiries.
Yes.
I see. And so other than the out-of-body experience, what is the other one?
Other than out-of-body experiences, another major area is near-death experiences. And your listeners should know of a very famous scientist in the last 40 years, Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the phrase light at the end of the tunnel, and even the term near-death experiences he coined in his famous book Life After Death. And many medical professionals have stories, and many people have stories about near-death experience in which their bodies physically died, in which they didn't have a heartbeat anymore. Maybe they were on the operating table, or maybe they were
in a coma.
In a coma or in a car accident, and the paramedics gave them CPR and brought them back to life. And they reported, being out of their body, seeing the ambulance or seeing the medics trying to resuscitate them, and all the while maybe they'd see this bright tunnel and being drawn to this light tunnel and wanting to go there, but going back to their body. These are common themes in near-death experiences. And again, the scientist that does this is Raymond Moody, written many books about that. So this body of evidence supports the the notion of survival and the afterlife, because we are not, according to this evidence, we are not our physical body. And according to this evidence, we maintain an individual identity after our bodies die.
But these two show that, yeah, there is an existence outside of this body.
Yes.
But does it show how long that existence can be? The length of that life?
Well,
has anyone checked on that?
As a spiritualist, I believe that our souls are eternal. They live forever. So is there a body of evidence about how old our souls are? Not really. You know, that's where religion and science come together again, and we have to believe things on faith until evidence comes along that replaces sheer faith.
So more scientific research is needed for this.
Yes, to see how long our souls actually live. Are they eternal? When were the souls created? Did the souls themselves ever end their existence? These are very good questions.
Maxine,
these are very good questions.
Thank you. Earlier, when we were just chatting on this whole topic, you were referring to a Leslie Flint. And
yes.
A little bit about the mediumship. We don't want to go into detail because we don't have that much time. So,
okay. There is much evidence that supports the theory of survival. And part of this body of evidence is through mediumship, either mental mediumship or physical mediumship. Now, there was a very famous medium in the 1940s and 1950s called Leslie Flint. And your viewers can look him up. Leslie-Flint, Leslie Flint. And Leslie Flint was a physical medium who produced direct voice phenomena, in that he wouldn't even need to go into a trance. He would be in a state like I am. However, people around him would hear voices out of the air.
And these voices belong to?
And these voices belong to, according to the theory of survival, these voices belong to, quote, dead people, or people who have lived, but now their bodies have died. Discarnate entities, dead people. And so he'd be speaking, and there'd be a voice over here. There'd be a voice over here. And not only were these voices recognizable, they'd speak in a language that Leslie Flint didn't know. They'd be a woman's voice. They'd be a man's voice. They'd be a young person's voice. It would be impossible for Leslie Flint to be a ventriloquist. In fact, the scientists tested him by gagging him, putting a piece of cloth in his mouth, and even putting water in his mouth, and then gagging him. And still the voices came. And if your listeners go online, they could hear Leslie Flint talking, and then these voices also speaking in the mannerisms that they would have had when they were alive and in bodies. So how can we not live after death if these voices don't go on and have intelligence and are able to have individual consciousness even after they die? So isn't that fabulous that we have that type of material even now recorded on the internet? Through the Leslie Flint Foundation, I believe.
Yeah. Otherwise, as a normal person, we'd say that's impossible, or it's just something.
Well, again, going back to science, you know, they would think it's impossible that the sun is the center of the solar system.
Yeah.
You know, these notions of being impossible change over time as our notion of science changes.
Maxine, in these experiments and in these observations, did they find out whether these voices, did they find out if they were coming from heaven or from hell or from where?
Now, that's a very good question, because if Christians believe in a hell, if Muslims believe in a hell, if Jews believe in a hell, what evidence do we have of a hell? And the voices, the body of evidence that Leslie Flint was able to produce shows no evidence of hell. You know, the voice is not coming and saying, "Oh, I'm in hell. It's hot in here, and I'm sorry." Da, da, da.
So basically, they're saying, "Oh, we are fine," right?
Yes.
Most of the time.
Yes. Yes.
Are there any instances where they say, "Oh, I'm miserable here"?
Not that I know of.
Okay,
Not that I know of. Again, I don't purport to know everything, and I don't purport to say that science won't change over time, but from where I am right now, the body of evidence, the sheer body of evidence, doesn't support that.
Oh, there is so much more I want to ask, but we are kind of almost out of time.
Okay.
I know this brings me to the topic of ghosts, and for people who believe in ghosts, now that's a whole different topic. I know I want to tell our audience that today we only tried to just introduce this topic and just give just an overview of the topic, because otherwise we can go on for hours discussing it. Maybe you'll come back again to do another show and more shows to explain as the science in this grows. Also, if you come next time, please bring your new book that you're writing.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you very much, Maxine.
You're welcome.
Coming
Thank
all the
you
way
so
and
much.
explaining everything to us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope you learned something from this. If you have any questions or comments, please write to practicaltalktime@yahoo.com. And if you want to watch the show again, we'll be putting it up on YouTube at some point. And then if you go to practicaltalktime.weebly.com, you might find the link to the show again. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.